I came here in 1973, I flew in from Arizona. Two things baffled me right away. One were these puffy white things in the sky, which they told me were clouds, because in Arizona, they're just at 25,000 feet and they're real thin. And the other was, I was going to Gardens Airport, which, as many of you know, if you might recall, was plowed under in the late 80s to become Palm Beach Gardens Airfield, which was cleverly made out of some substance that would shred your tires at about 2 landings, you know, shell rock and all. And so I landed there, and I landed right in the thick of a lot of the activity that was going on in 1973. At that time, most of the, in fact, all of the goods that were being flown into Gardens was marijuana. And it came from several stations, Norman's Cay, Great Harbor, and Gorda Cay, which is funny because Gorda Cay subsequently became Castaway Cay, and Disney uses it as a stop for their cruise ships, and people think how quaint it is, this fake old runway and this crashed plane, but that's the real thing. I mean, the aircraft went to several different places, but one of the major stops was Gardens Airport, because it was west of Military Trail, which was nothing. You know, it was just palmetto and scrub, and there was no police activity there. So the planes would come in, and if it was a heavy load, they would wait until nightfall, and everybody would unload at once. And the normal modus operandi would be that Colombian illegals would come up with trucks and vans and moving vehicles and unload and head south. Goods were sometimes dropped from aircraft, but really that's not such a hot idea, because if you have a low-wing plane, it's pretty much of a problem, and it's also hard with one person. So if you have another person with you, not only do you have to trust that guy, but he weighs maybe 180 pounds, and that's 3 or 4 bales, you know, quite a bit of money that you're throwing away if you. So most of the planes actually landed and unloaded. There was no fear at all of law enforcement, and this continued almost up until President Reagan declared his war on drugs. The plane that we just talked about, typical Cherokee 6, would hold 18 bales of Columbia Red, street value $900,000. Wholesale, $350,000. The courier fee was $100,000. Now, that's a pretty good day's work. You had to pay your own gas and oil, but still, you know. Once the switch to cocaine, and now we're talking about going down to Colombia to get it, that plane would hold 44 kilos with a street price of $29 million, wholesale price of $12 million, and the courier made $1.32 million for the trip. Now, sometimes he doubled it, and I'll tell you why. Colombians had no use for dollars. Everything was in pesos. They bought governments, they bought everything they needed, paste. It all was in pesos. But they didn't trust anybody to change the money. So the dollars were brought down to Colombia and exchanged down there. Now, assuming these are $100 bills, which they usually were, and they're dry, which wasn't always the case, a dollar bill weighs a gram. A $100 bill weighs a gram. That meant that the plane would hold $44 million of cash. So the courier fee there, which was 3%, was another $1.3 million. So if a pilot was clever, he could take the cash from Florida, fly it down to Colombia, and then pick up a load on the way back, and he made over $2.5 million in 2 days. Now, let me tell you the size of this business. At the height of the Medellin cartel, which later was superseded by the Cali boys, but they were bringing in $60 million per day, cash. And they had, there were warehouses all through Colombia with cash. And they had loss figures based on what the rats would chew up in the warehouses of hundreds. It was beyond belief. Pablo Escobar had more money than the Colombian government. and a better army. This was the route that was taken from Santa Marta, which is on the northwest coast of Colombia, back to Florida, with a stop off in Puerto Lempira. Now, that and the yellow line is the Bahamas route. So it's a lot shorter from the Bahamas, but it paid a lot less. Now, a very interesting thing happened one day in Puerto Lempira. The snowman flew in there on his way down, maybe his way back, and there were a bunch of planes there with basically unmarked. He found out this was CIA. There were a whole fleet of CIA aircraft in there, probably because just to the south, Nicaragua was boiling over, and Somoza was stealing everything, and it was just a mess. So the CIA wanted to protect what interests they felt needed to be protected. Well, they ran into each other. And although the snowman had a pretty good alibi, he was flying medical supplies, he said, they contacted him after he got back to Florida and arranged a deal because they wanted to fly Coke themselves. Now, this was in 1975, I think. In 73, the CIA had sold off Southern Air Transport. They no longer had the ability to fly, and the other planes they had just weren't suitable. So it was to their benefit to find somebody that could quietly bring cocaine in. And they used it for all sorts of nefarious purposes that I don't really know, but you can imagine, you know, bribing governments, people. I mean, it's the currency of crime and corruption, and that's who the CIA had to deal with. You may know there are more undercover cops in Palm Beach than almost anywhere in the United States, or maybe even the United States, but nobody never caught on, okay? So years went by, the battle grew. There were, excuse me, a number of incidents where one of the pilots almost collided with a helicopter who was on a rescue mission on a foggy night off the Straits of Florida. And at that time, Reagan had declared the war on drugs, so they were sending AWACS planes up, you know, with the big dish on top, and they were trying to track these guys without a lot of success. Now, in the early days, a pilot would just fly in at any altitude you wanted, dip down low as you got near the land, and come up over the coast, join the pattern at maybe Gardens, if that's where you're going. And so it looked like you just took off and came back and landed. And it worked fine. There was no way to be tracked, really. So that was the method that was used for years. The biggest danger, and I think the population has declined of pelicans, because I don't see them much anymore. But if you're flying at 100 feet or 200 feet, you do not want to hit a pelican.